Friends, welcome into another edition of the Soccer Tejas podcast. I'm Alex Parra. I know you've missed us a little bit this summer, but someone has to take a vacation. Someone has to travel. It isn't Alex Parra, but it's the two people that you now see on screen with me, our co-hosts. I guess we're all co-hosts in this. Let's start first with the one and only Laura Gomez. Laura, a good day, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. How was your vacation to Hong Kong? Did you enjoy it?
First of all, Alex, stop spreading rumors and lies because you know very well that I have not taken a vacation because you have not let me, okay? First of all. So, no, it is a lie. I have not been on vacation. We've been working digitally a lot and, trying to cover soccer as most as we can. So, we just had to take a little hiatus like the Houston Dash during the summer, and now we're back.
We're back and stronger and better than ever, we hope, more than anything. Laura, it's great to be with you. Always a pleasure. Let's also introduce the third part of this co-host, I guess, trio. I guess I'm being redundant here. You see him on screen as well. Professor Victor Araiza. Victor, I like the glasses. How are you?
Doing fine, Alex. I didn't quite make it all the way to Hong Kong, but I'm fine in the good old U.S. of A. I don't got to really go out anywhere.
Right now, well, be careful these days. If you go, you may not come back, Victor. But that's a story for another day. We'll just leave that one there. Well, friends, it is great to be back, and we appreciate all of your feedback when it comes to the Soccer Tejas podcast. A lot to talk about, and I think after maybe reflecting, Laura, as you mentioned, taking a hiatus, taking a breath, maybe it's time to talk about, I think, one of the white elephants in Houston soccer, which is where are we as a sport on the professional side? The Houston Dynamo of the MLS, the Houston Dash of the NWSL, relative to other sports, relative to attendance, relative to support in the city. My take initially is, look, there haven't been sellouts at these stadiums once, maybe every 5 years. What is that trying to tell us? We are blessed to be covering both teams. We're blessed to be covering the Dash on a regular basis here on the Portes Nation. And there's yet to be a sellout during our coverage of 2 seasons. Those are facts. Victor, in the last couple of Dynamo games, even against the top team arguably in the MLS, which is Philadelphia Union, at kickoff, you see less than half the stadium full. And then during the match, you're not at 100% capacity. Is this something we should be talking about? Is this now a reality of professional soccer in Houston? Victor, I'll turn to you first. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we kind of revisit this every year because it doesn't really seem to change. I think it's the reality. It's been the reality. People can come up with a bunch of different excuses. The heat, the seats, are there enough inclusive areas, your VIP sections, do you get enough perks? I think all these things maybe play into it, but ultimately it's the product on the field. It's not just the style of play. I think, with the soccer club, we just saw it at the Club World Cup with all these teams that came over, right? I mean, they have fans that care enough to follow them all over the world. I keep going back to the connection. I don't know if that connection's being made to make Houston, first and foremost, care about the team. And then, what the plan is after that to make global impact. Because again, it from the local level all the way global, soccer is like no other sport in that you can reach all corners of the world because they already love the sport. I mean, this isn't like foreigners trying to get into the NFL or even Japan might have the thing with baseball, but I mean, I think all over the world, the common language has always been soccer as a common sport.
Right.
And the biggest thing I think that we keep continuing to go to is that there's a prime opportunity right now in the United States to really latch on to the World Cup, the momentum that's coming with the World Cup next year. And on top of that, being part of as a host city, and we, I think we've all said it. I don't think we feel that enough is being done to sort of grab onto that momentum and let it pull you pull you upwards. So we'll see. There's still less than a year left, but we'll see.
Well, Victor, I'm going to interrupt you, and Laura, maybe you can chime in though. But is this our reality for soccer? That we are not the top sport in the city? I think that's factual. You could say that Texans, Astros, Rockets, Texans, Rockets, Astros, top three. And then, by the way, maybe the Houston Dynamo. So in this reality, Laura, our expectations should be tempered. Don't expect a sellout. If we consistently get 15,000 people, that's enough. That's sufficient. Is that just the truth that we live?
No, I think it's BS because, I mean, the reality was that a couple years ago, the Astros couldn't even give away their tickets. And it's something that we've pointed out many times because before, being, in this team with you guys, I did a lot of covering for the Astros. I covered a lot of games for the Astros. And there was games that there was I'm telling you, there was probably 10 people there. Yeah. I got to buy tickets for up to $5 and it came with a drink and a hot dog. That's how bad things were. So I think that just saying, oh, there's not enough people or they're entertained with other sports, I think that's BS. I think that's an excuse. For me, Houston is a soccer city. Is the World Cup coming to Houston a pill that's going to fix everything? No, because there has to be work done for people to actually want to go see a specific team. When we've seen other teams, Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, whatever teams have been here in Houston and, played here, they've been sellouts, if I'm not mistaken, or close to sellouts. So for me, it's not saying Houston is not a soccer city. I just think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done by the Dash and the Dynamo. Women's soccer is having a great momentum right now. We're having the Eurocopa, we're having Copa America, we're having the African Cup. So when somebody tells me, oh, it's, the women's sport isn't as entertaining, it's not going to fill many, stadiums, that's BS to me too, because we've seen all around the world that they are doing sellouts, but those teams are doing specific things to attract those fans there.
Well, so just to be clear, I'm not happy with it personally as a soccer guy, if you will, a soccer old man. Maybe it's a clarification. But you're saying that the fans aren't showing up. I'm not putting words in your mouth, Laura. The fans aren't showing up not because of the product, but because the word isn't getting out. They're not getting motivated. Are you saying it's a marketing failure?
No, I'm not. Well, I'm not saying that they're not showing up because of the product. No, they're not showing up. Yeah, because the product is not enticing. If they want to go see their home team win, and the Astros was playing that same night, which team is going to have more probability of winning? Reality is, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, because I love the Stros. So the Stros are going to be the ones that are going to have those people, go right and get their tickets that are way more expensive than a Dash or Dynamo tickets. It breaks my heart every time I go see the Dash because, for one, I don't think that they've had enough marketing compared in other years as the men have. I think that they've gotten better in the last couple of seasons, but I still think that there's work needs to be done. So for them, I think it's a combination. But for the the Dynamo, I do think that the product is meh. And when I say meh, they're not winning games. The supporters barely came back to see them again. So there's a lot of issues that they're having that go far way beyond marketing. I mean, they need to win games, and if you bring the players, the people shall come because the wins will come, and people want to see a team that wins, and that's just the plain truth. Whether you call them bandwagon fans or just opportunist fans or whatever, it needs to be done. That the Dash and the Dynamo need to be winning all their games because it's a new turnaround of Houstonians. We've had a lot of people come in from other states
right
in the last couple of years. So you need to entice those people to want to cheer on, if not wear the jerseys, at least go to the games and cheer on these teams that are winning. But if they're coming from a team that's, somewhere else that they're, used to seeing those teams win, why are they going to spend their money on a soccer game that they're not going to see the local team win? You know what I'm saying? So it's a combination of several things. It's not just marketing.
No, and I agree with you. It's a combination. It's a combination of the youth support that doesn't exist. That's something they've been working on. It's the spending on players. Right now, the average sports fan, I'm going to say this, the average sports fan can't name 3 players on the Houston Dynamo roster. I can almost guarantee that. Victor, what's the answer? How do we fix this? And I know you've talked about this for years. Grassroots, getting out there, connecting with the people in English and Spanish. There's so many things, but is the organization not listening? Are they listening but not acting and being able to? It seems that many of us know these things. Now, I don't pretend tomorrow that if someone anointed me with the decision-making power, I could fix it. But what steps need to be taken in that direction, Victor?
Well, it's a lot of things you just mentioned, but I think people have to understand, because again, I don't want to completely just come on here and gang up on the current administration, obviously, because that's probably what it comes across. I mean, but I think people need to understand that there was a decline of many years. I would say even over maybe the whole decade, maybe just over, for the club.
Yeah.
Where it dug itself into a big hole. So I think there has to be a full-on effort, all hands on deck from every area that you can think of, like you mentioned, from the academy side, from the marketing, from the product on the field, from management. It has to be a big-time effort because that's only the way you're going to make big strides to build yourself out of that hole. And it's no fault to the people that are currently in charge, or maybe even the owner that's currently in charge, for, again, what we've called the sins of the past. But, I always say this, they need to be a little bit more careful in the way they say things, because I think that there's some things they might say with good intentions, but it sounds just like the people that were there before. And for people that you're trying to win back, it hampers you from doing that.
So, Victor,
again, you got to make people care about this team, have a passion for this team, just like they do for the Astros and the Texans and the Rockets. People go out there because they're bought into those stars. But also, again, this is such a worldwide sport. There's people in Houston that soccer is their number one sport. If you make them pick, what sport you rather watch between that and American football and baseball, you have enough people to pick from. I just think, sometimes, those efforts have to, kind of be multiplied in some cases. And I don't want to say the hole's too deep, because, again, I think there's a unique opportunity here. I keep hammering on it because it's the World Cup,
Victor. Victor,
and if you wanted something that could give you that impulse,
this would be it.
It's that.
Look, Victor, so I'm going to play the old man in the group, which I happen to be. Every World Cup, even before the '94 World Cup that came to the United States, it's promoted, it's marketed as that this is it. We are on the zenith of United States being a soccer country. That didn't happen in 1994. Fact. Today in Houston, the three other major sports teams are ahead when it comes to almost any criteria with the Houston Dynamo. Do I wish that would change? Absolutely. But my fear is that in roughly 13 months post 2026 World Cup, when the Dynamo and Dash are waiting to receive the fruits of that, it's going to be back to the same. Maybe it's not a fault, Victor and Laura, of the teams. It's our culture. Laura, I don't want to contradict you. I agree, we're a soccer city, but maybe we're not an MLS city. Maybe we're not an NWSL city. We are
because I've seen people with Gotham FC jerseys. I've seen people with, this might be controversial and say, I've seen people with Messi jerseys because he's international, but I've seen people with, Beckham shirts too, or I've seen, a lot of the old school Dynamo players. And I'm saying there's still that reminiscence. There's still that, kind of romanticism and kind of nostalgia of the old Dynamo. People reminiscing, say,
sure,
the old Robertson stadiums where we used to win, blah, 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 and things like that. So I don't want to say that we're not a, MLS or NWSL. I just feel like there's a lot of things that need to be done. And one of the things that needs to be done, at least for the Dynamo, is get those players out here. Because, again, people want to see teams win. And it's just a simple, very, plain answer. People want to go see teams win. And again, and that contributes into saying, oh, well, other teams haven't won. The Texans aren't the best team out there, but they've gotten a little better. But the thing is that they've done enough to get the new fans involved and wanting to go, which the side of the MLS hasn't.
Laura, I'm going to interrupt you. The Houston Texans still sell out whether they make the playoffs or not. Whether people attend the games or not, deep in the season, maybe you can say the stadium wasn't full, but tickets are sold out. And that speaks to me, and I think I'm speaking factually. Houston is a American football city first.
No. I don't look. I'm not going to say
I disagree with that.
I'm not saying that it's going to be a football city forever. Maybe it is for now. Maybe it turns around because a couple of years ago when we had a lot of years ago, Hakeem Olajuwon and things like that, nobody could say anything about any other sport in the city. So I think it's just cycles that the city will have. The thing is, again, with the Texans, they do a little marketing. They make you fall in love with players. So they had JJ Watt, and he's amazing. He's this, he's that. So they have that kind of marketing that's in your face. They're in HEB, the Astros too. They're in billboards. They're on shirts. They're in Academy. They're on beers. They're on drinks. It's just a lot. And the Dynamo and the Dash do not have that. So that's why they have that recycling of fans. So the fans that were there maybe 5 years ago when the Texans sucked and, they had Kubiak and then he left and won, those are not the same fans they have now. They have some of them that are still there, but the other ones have come in. I have people that have never, ever watched the Texans and they got a new player. They're like, oh my, I love the Texans. And now they go to the games. So they've kept that momentum of recycling and getting new fans to do that. So the word wouldn't be recycling. I think it would be like more engaging the new fans. And the Dynamo hasn't done that. And the Dash, honestly, the Dash has never had the opportunity to really have that. They had some momentum when they had like Carly Lloyd and when they won that,
the Dash have had opportunity.
Yeah, so it's different. There are different elements that are going on. But for me, the Dynamo just needs to get players. It is what it is. I mean, look at the little momentum they have with Victor Araiza.
Well, we can talk about that level of player. Victor, you have a lot on your mind. I can tell by your glasses fogging up.
There you go. Now, look, Houston was in on the Dynamo back when Beckham was just getting into the league. Back when the league only had, 12 teams? And there was something built there. There was a connection built there. There was people that went to Robertson Stadium. You had an intimate connection. The players came through the parking lot, came through the, that sort of
autograph
edge
alley?
of the bleachers or whatever you call it. Yeah, that alley where they came out to, and you got to, fans got to extend their hands out while they were coming out to the field. Even in the beginning years of the new stadium, Batallon, Texan Army, the supporters were right there by the tunnel. Then they got moved right all the way across the field. All of these are elements that go into having that personal connection that have been lost over the years. People wanted that stadium because that was the way to keep the Dynamo permanent in this town. I don't know how many people still remember that this team, fans were afraid that we would lose this team to another market if a stadium didn't get built. When the stadium finally got built, it had a good year, and then it sort of seemed like maybe that connection started to, again, deter year after year after year with just, again, I'm not going to get into it, but I think it's proven now that MLS has Messi, that they've had all these stars, and that's part of it too. There's not as much star power,
Victor.
If you're trying to get somebody to come out and watch your team, and they're already maybe not into your team, and then they don't know anybody on Philadelphia or Vancouver, they don't know who they are. There's nothing. I mean, there's no talk about the league. There's none of that media presence about the MLS. That's also something that hurts the Dynamo. Y'all remember Messi was almost coming to town earlier this year, right?
Almost.
And that stadium almost got full, and it didn't because the prices were a little way higher than they should have been. But what are you gonna tell me? There's not a market for it? It's just a one. No, I think. So there's Victor, enough fans here in this area to cultivate that. Okay. We wouldn't be getting World Cup games if this wasn't a good soccer market.
I agree with you. Now, we'll talk about the World Cup and why I think they've come to Houston and what that's going to be, which is another issue. I think it's a separate than the Dynamo Dash, which is what we're focusing on right now, friends. Victor, Laura, I think to me it's simple, but it's expensive. If Messi were playing for the Houston Dynamo, I should say, yes, we'd have sellouts. I go back to this. Arguably, the highest profile international signing in the history of this club, of the Dynamo, was Hector Herrera. And we know how that worked itself out. Maybe 2 sellouts in the 2.5, 3 years he was here. Maybe. So those are facts. No one can tell us, yeah, you signed a Mexican national team player and that stadium's going to be full. That's been proven wrong. So if the organization, and that's the pathway to sellouts, to support, to sell merchandise, is going and signing a true superstar, and Mexican fans are going to get mad at me about Hector Herrera not being a true superstar. It's not happening. We didn't sign Beckham. You mentioned Beckham, Victor. Is that what Mr. Tetsuko needs to do?
It's also with education. I mean, I think it was naive, and I think I pretty much said time. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. Anybody that had any knowledge of the Mexican national team could tell you Hector Herrera was not going to be a slam dunk in ticket sales throughout the entire, because we've seen it with other stars in MLS where it fades. There's an impulse at the beginning, but you have to maintain that. And that's why I go back to, I don't think they did enough to try to ride that wave or make that impulse. On top of that, you got to know the market. Mexican fans were annoyed, mad, whatever word you want to use, with Hector Herrera for leaving Europe before he got to the World Cup representing Mexico. And that's part of the issue with winning over the Mexican fan, right? I mean, that cuts your market. So all these are factors that you have to know that you're working against. And I think the club just signed the player thinking, well, they got to show up. And if they don't show up, then it's kind of like, well, what are we doing here? But there's explanations to all of this. And if you listen to, again, we're not here to just badger the team. I think we're actually offering more knowledge. I'm not trying to, act like I'm smarter than anybody, but I think there is, a lot of explanation to why, things don't work out for the Dynamo. We mentioned several factors. The biggest one, the fastest one, the simplest thing to solve, winning in a nice way, winning with goals, scoring. The last 2 games, they've only generated 1 penalty.
Yeah.
1 penalty goal. This is not an offensive team. This is not a team. I hate to say it because I think the attendance shows it. You want a spectacle. You don't want to just go watch. If you go watch the Houston Rockets, you want to see that up and down the court, right? You want to see the 3-pointers, but you also want to see the showtime to it, right? If you go to watch the Astros, you want to watch the home runs. Of course you want to see them win a game, but you want to be entertained. And again, several different factors, but I think it starts with that, and then you build on it as you continue to go forward. No, it's not going to be an overnight fix, but I think it starts with that, and then you add to it. This whole thing about seats and the heat and all that thing, I think when you're invested in the team, you go. You're there, right? You have to give people a reason to care. Tell me why people in Green Bay withstand the cold to go watch the Packers.
Yeah.
Right? Or, the same thing in any club in Latin America, any soccer club in Latin America, why they fill their stadiums when they're sitting on pavement, when they don't got, cushion to sit on, and they're probably, not selling cold beer. I think you have to build that connection back with the team. One last thing. When I go back to Robertson, we should be at the point where now the children of the fans from the Robertson days and the grandchildren are supporting this team. Why has that been lost, right? We're only talking about 20,000 people. I go back to 20,000 people in a city of 2 million, metro area of 6-7 million. I mean, I think all these little things, all these factors add up. And again, I think it starts at the top, because I think that's the ownership group has the biggest impact, the biggest immediate impact. They have to start slamming their fist on the table and saying, listen, we got to make some headway here.
Victor, look, I agree with most of what you've said. And yes, your glasses do make you look more intellectual and someone to listen to. If you notice, I didn't interrupt you much, so it's working. Keep going with them. But in all seriousness, Victor, I like what you just said. It should now be generational support for the Houston Dynamo. It should now be generational support for women's sports in general. But we're not getting there. And I get it. Most of you friends that follow us, some of you feel the same way, and the frustration of not being able to have our sport sell out stadiums. But you mentioned the response, I think, the answer, Victor, in your last comments. It's leadership. Someone has to be leading and saying, look, we need to come together in this. The people I speak to in the organization, many of them are well aware of the lack of attendance. And it hurts. The issue I see, Victor, is that it has to be a combination of people that know the Houston market, that have a history, and a lot of people, Laura, that now run the organization don't know Robertson Stadium. They hear about it. They didn't live it. They hear about the lack of youth soccer support. They hear about it, but they didn't know the impact, literally a generational impact that it's had on the team. So maybe it's part of a balance of course, new ideas, bright ideas, spending money, bringing in players, but also knowing Houston better, Laura? Is that fair?
Well, that's the word that I was looking for when I said recycle. I think it's generational. And I think that's something, again, that the Texans have been ones to really know how to squeeze the juice out of that, right? Because if you're in a household, like, you're going to be a Texan. Like, I can give an example. Like, I have family members that, they're from Colombia, and they're fans of the Dallas Cowboys because that's the first team they ever heard of football, American football in Colombia. So now they have a kid, and that kid had a kid, and they're all the lineages now, no matter how bad the Dallas Cowboys get, they still have fans that are generational. I think that that's something that the Dynamo had more than enough people and experience to do and keep growing to it. The Dash, I think that we're just seeing that now. I'm a sideline reporter, so I get to see that. I get to see the interaction of, like, maybe a little bit older parents that, maybe saw women's soccer before. It was something that everybody kind of knew about, and are bringing their daughters or sons to see this. So I think that the Dash is barely starting that. But for me, there's only two things that you could do to fill up those stadiums, and it's two things. Either you're going to have a low budget, but you're going to win. You're going to have, players that nobody knows, but you're winning, and that makes people interested. Or two, you have to get a superstar that scores and makes the game interesting. Not only a big superstar, but a superstar that actually scores. So at the end of the day, it's really the outcome is that everybody wants. It's a winning team. That's it. It's simple. Like, I don't want to hear more complications. I don't want to hear about Laura. No, it's just, for me, it's you either have those two ways. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. You win. Because, for me, it's sad when I see the Dash not win, because I see the work that those women have done throughout the years with all the hardships. But people don't know that, because if they go and Google the Dash, they will see that they've never made it to, the postseason. And that's all they're going to see, unfortunately. They're not going to see that those girls, ran the 90 minutes. The women ran the 90 minutes. They're not going to see all, the pains that they've had, injuries, and they've been coming back, all the sacrifices that they've made because they, before they weren't getting paid enough and had 4 different jobs. They don't see that. So at the end of the day, unfortunately, when you're trying to fill up stadiums, it's all about the W. It's all about the winning, because, yeah, they're going to have that nostalgia and things like that, but you're not going to get a kid nowadays to be like, hey, what team do you want to go see? And you haven't nurtured that. They might want to go see one game, but then they're going to be like, but they didn't win, I'm bored. Because I've seen it. I've seen, like, me wanted to take people to go see the Dash, the Dynamo, and they're like, yeah, but I'm like, no, but remember, and they're like, yeah, I don't care, so I think it's a combination of people doing their job to foment that. But if you see that team that they're not even trying to score, you think that they're not trying to score the way that they're being managed in the last couple of years, what makes you want to pass on that losing streak to another person, to another generation? So it's kind of, at least it has to have some ups and downs. Like, you have to have some of that. But I feel like the Dynamo has had more downs in the recent years than, really high highs.
Friends, I think it's important to talk about these topics, and we also want to hear from you as soccer fans. And I imagine if you're watching us, you are a soccer fan or at least gravitate toward the sport. What would you do, especially if you're in Houston? What can the organization do better? What can we do better to support the professional teams? Which I think they Victor, you said it, 20,000 people in a marketplace of the size of Houston should not be difficult, especially with our diverse and international community. So, yes, we could spend another 3 hours straight talking about this, friends, but Mr. Producer is telling us to move on. So we will do that. But we do want to hear from you. And Victor, there's so much more there that I think the organization is trying, is attempting. But you know what? Facts will speak for themselves. When we have, I want to talk about the day when there's back-to-back sellouts under any circumstances, which would be amazing. And the day that, you know, Alex, your credentials are not approved for this game because we have some, and I'm going to say this, someone's going to get mad at me, some mainstream real media that are covering the team.
No, they better let us in, Alex. I don't know what you're talking about. We've been there through the rainy and ugly days, so they better let us in.
That's a whole other conversation for another day, the issue of coverage. But let me jump to something else. We talked about Houston being a soccer city or not. The World Cup coming next summer to our country. We just had the Club World Cup. We know what that is, Victor. We know what that is, Laura. Victor, I'll turn to you first. Was the tournament a success by whatever measure you want to take? The good, the bad, and the ugly, maybe, of what we just lived this summer here in the United States?
I think it was, without a doubt, a success. I think the attention, the interest grew as the competition went on, and I think most of it was positive because, again, the product on the field triumphed. Some of these matchups were intriguing. Matches that we hadn't seen before, Brazilian teams against German teams, or French or Spanish, English. Obviously, the fan bases that came over, not just from Brazil, but from Argentina, some of the European crowds as well. Obviously, I think a lot of those too were fueled from fans that, again, already live in the United States and travel to go see some of their favorite teams. The experience that it gave for MLS teams and Liga MX teams as well in this tournament, I think it's going to give more importance now to something like the CONCACAF Champions Cup, because I've already seen it with Mexican fans that maybe poo-pooed that tournament and say, it's just another cup. You know, as long as a Mexican team wins. I saw Mexican fans during this Club World Cup say, you know what? Now I want my team to win the Champions Cup because I want them to go to the next Club World Cup, and I want them to have a chance to facing some of these teams in these type of environments.
Right.
So I think a complete success. I think they try to get a little greedy at the beginning, and it could have been an even bigger success as far as attendance. But again, I think ultimately the product on the field won out, and that's why this tournament was a great tournament.
Laura, same question. I don't know if you have a different take, and then maybe a little follow-up about the success of basically, I think this is a dress rehearsal for the summer of 2026 here in the United States. Of course, Canada and Mexico included next summer as well. But Laura, your take on the Club World Cup?
I mean, I think that it was, at the end of the day, most people are going to say that it was a success. For me, I think it was partial. I think it started out very slow. The ticket sales were very slow, but I think the product, like, Victor mentioned, itself sold itself. So people started to get excited that, okay, we need to find tickets, and they were able to find tickets because the prices had also gone down. So that also helped people to actually be able to afford to see those matches. I think that it's interesting because I've been able to go to 2 World Cups, and the prices compared to what I'm hearing that they're going to cost in the U.S. are crazy high, crazy high. And not only that, but also the airplane, travel expenses are going to be extremely high. I think they're going to be higher than even the ones that they even had, the recent one that was in one of the Arab countries. So it's interesting to see how people reacted. I think it was very slow, and FIFA had to do things to make people want to go. But at the end of the day, it was a product on the field. All the talk about the Brazilian teams, being better than the European teams, and the European team saying, "Oh, what's going on?" It just kind of made this whole social media debate. So the marketing itself was successful, but I think that it was just a buzz, creating that buzz of like, "Oh, they're doing this, they're doing that." So they were fortunate to have that, because if the teams wouldn't have played well, or there wasn't that, kind of Latin American buzz with the European teams, maybe it wouldn't have been as successful. So this success, I would attribute it to the teams. I wouldn't attribute it necessarily to FIFA and the great job they've done. I think that they also got lucky in some sort of sense. I think that it was good to see also, what people were saying, what the players were saying, that the stadium, some of them, that the grass wasn't, good enough, that the grass needed more, this and that the heat was unbearable, things that need to be taken into consideration to really make the World Cup a success. So at the end of the day, I would say, yes, it was a success, but was it a major success? I would kind of say, I would say no, in the sort of sense, just because I think that it had a lot of points that were lucky. They got lucky for it to become the huge success that eventually it was.
Laura and Victor, I tend to agree that there's a lot more positive than negative. And I think when you put yourself out there on the international stage at this level of competition, it's going to be easy to find all the negative. We've talked about the weather. We've talked about transportation, infrastructure. And by the way, there's no better country, in my observation, in the world that can host better than the United States. So if we can't get it done here, don't expect it to get done someplace else. And we'll talk about that soon, Laura, when it comes to the Copa America and infrastructure and other things, resources. My concern, by the way, the product on the field, intriguing. We want to see that. We yearn to always compare our football, our soccer is better than theirs. And this is an actual opportunity. Yes, there were some lopsided scores early on in the qualification in the early round, and it's intriguing to also see semi-professional clubs against top-tier clubs. That's exciting to me. I think the danger is becoming the following: that we're getting too busy in too many competitions simultaneously going on, and the powers that be need to keep it interesting. At some point, it becomes too much. Even soccer fans like ourselves, we couldn't keep up with every match going on this past summer. I certainly couldn't, because you have to buy this service or that service, flying, getting there. So that's danger number one. We don't want to oversaturate the market, because then people are going to tune out and expect more. So I think that's an important piece of it. And second, Laura, you mentioned it. This is no longer, and the World Cup, I believe, will demonstrate this, an accessible sport for the common fan. It's rights holders, it's sponsors, and it's VIPs that are going to be in those stadiums. I think that's a fact. No matter how many teams you bring in and expand the number of games, that's the reality, I think, that we're all living. Who can afford $500 to $1,000 per ticket? I get it. This only comes once every 4 years. I get it. This may not come back to the United States for another 20 years. But at some point, if you oversaturate the market and you price people out, you've got to think about that. There's other ways to make it more accessible. And maybe that's my only criticism of where the Club World Cup went and where maybe next summer goes with the FIFA World Cup. So, friends, again, back to the question, Laura. You said Houston is a soccer city. Is the United States a soccer country? Maybe we'll end with that. Laura, are we a soccer country?
I think that the United States women have played a great role, a very important role, if not the only role, to be honest, compared to the men, to make it a sport that could potentially be an American sport. For me, it's already a sport in the US, but I'm originally from Colombia. So for me, there was never another sport that was going to take my heart, my TV, and my money in a major way as soccer. So I think that my answer is biased, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to say, yeah, I think America is, a soccer country because there's so many people from other parts of the world
But Laura,
are here.
Laura, forgive me for interrupting you. Very rude of me. But as a sports journalist, is the United States now on the cusp? And I'll turn to Victor shortly with the World Cup coming. That 13 months from now, post 2026 World Cup, the United States will be a soccer country. Can we say that definitively? Are we headed in that direction? I'll be quiet.
I mean, it really depends what city you're in, who you ask. It really just depends because for me, my short answer without giving explanation, I would say yes. Because again, I attribute that to the women's U.S. national team because they sparked that interest. The U.S. is good at one thing. They always want to beat everyone at everything. So we know that we go through it with the Olympics or the people that have one of the biggest, largest teams in the Olympics. They're, track and volleyball doesn't bring a lot of attention until, everybody's wearing track and volleyball jerseys and things like that. And they're like, oh my God, this and that. So I think that it brings in the pride of, the U.S. and they're going to win. So I think that the women's team really did that. Not only that, but really brought the struggles that the women were facing with what they hadn't been paid and what they were being promised compared to the men that haven't done anything. The U.S. men they haven't done anything, honestly. I think that they've spent money, but that's practically all that they've done. And the women, with the bare minimum that they had back then, did a lot, and they won championships. So they sparked that interest. Now, like I said, there's a lot of people from different parts of the country, which makes the world, which makes America great, right? All the people that are from different parts of the world. So I know that soccer is the sport that's most widely played and watched compared to football. American football, you have it where? You have it in the U.S., you have it in Mexico, maybe another country, 2 or 3 countries that have it majorly. Baseball as well, they have it in Japan, they have it in Mexico, Puerto Rico, which is part of the U.S., Panama, and other countries like that, even Colombia. But the sport that is mostly played in a large scale is soccer. So to me, it's a very obvious question of saying, is America, a soccer country? I would say, yeah, I think it is.
Professor Araiza, do you concur with that? Is the United States a soccer country? Maybe not the only sport, clearly, maybe not the top sport, but are we now a soccer country? Are we finally there?
I think it's been a soccer country, and I think the attendances prove it in the many international games that come here during the summer, the many club friendlies that come here during the summer. Again, maybe it's not always reflected in the local leagues or the domestic leagues, I should say. Maybe even with the national team, it hasn't been reflected shortly. But I think if you combine all the numbers, all the viewership for the Premier League, La Liga, Liga MX, any other league around the world, because again, this is a country full of immigrants. They all have a tie back home, and a lot of that ties in with soccer because it's played all over the world. You've seen it in youth soccer. There's thousands of millions, if not billions of dollars shelled out for youth soccer and training to play the sport. I would say like no other country because, there's probably that business is probably only that way here. But I think in many fronts, it is. Maybe it hasn't gotten the recognition, but I think it is. I think it's just as big as any of the other sports in this country. Obviously, the NFL is in a world of its own, but I think the global impact obviously trumps the NFL. We'll see it here with the World Cup. People are calling it, I'll use their own words. People are calling it for Houston, the 7 games, 7 Super Bowls. Well, how massive is one Super Bowl? Think about that for a moment, and now think of how many games are going to be here next summer. That is a hell of a task. And again, it's a bunch of money that's going to be made. I think you just mentioned it here with the Club World Cup, maybe oversaturation. I think soccer has been big business. And maybe now the market's finally catching up because the demand is certainly there. The interest is certainly there. And I don't think it's inaccessible because, again, we just talked about it's accessible at the MLS level. You can go to a Dynamo game if you want to and watch the sport locally. What's going to make you go there? That's the difference, right? But yeah, I think absolutely. You just mentioned all these streaming services that people pay for.
Yep.
It's a pain to have them all, but people pay them to watch these games. So absolutely. I think the United States is a soccer country, and anybody who doesn't believe that maybe hasn't been connected to the sport or doesn't want to pay attention.
Yeah, look, I would argue that in certainly markets, which is basically every large market in the United States, our diversity and our international flavor attract us more to the sport. But what I am seeing now is more traditionally non-diverse communities are also gravitating. Laura, you're correct, because of the national teams. The women's national team, of course, winning World Cups, something that I think the men, after I've watched lately, I don't think are any closer than we've been. But that's another conversation for another day. The last thing I'll mention, though, is the following, and kind of taking us a little bit away from our rundown, Victor and Laura. What about the coverage of the sport? I still believe that we have a lot of traditional media, sports, entertainment business that don't cover the sport because they simply don't know it. It's alien. I'm using the term intentionally to them. It's foreign. I'm using the term intentionally for them. They don't connect with it because they grew up traditional media, sports media. They grew up with basketball, baseball, and football and hockey. It's still strange for them. And in their analysis, you can see it. I don't think they have to worry about not knowing the minutia of the sport. But how do we get all of us to talk more about the sport, Laura, and not feel bad about it? You know, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world, he doesn't have a clue about many things, but he doesn't have a clue about soccer. And I think his insecurity of not knowing the sport, his ignorance, means that he's rejecting it for the traditional American sports. Am I even making a fair comment, Laura? And you don't have to comment on that, but how do we get the media to cover our sport better?
I mean, I think it's going to get covered automatically. And I think we've seen it within the last few events that they've had here in Houston for the World Cup. We've seen media that I've never seen.
Sure.
And I think it's, changed quite a few bit, because I remember when the Dynamo, and I was an intern in one of the bigger English channels here in Houston. And I remember asking, the lead sports broadcaster, I'm like, hey, are we going to cover anything about, the Dynamo and Brian Ching and, et cetera, et cetera? He's like, who's that?
Who's that? Yeah.
My face was like, I could not, because it just blew my mind, because I was like, what do you mean? I mean, you're a sports broadcaster, you're the lead, and you're in a major Houston TV channel, and you don't know who that is. Like, I'm like, but they wanted me to go cover, like a college volleyball game. And I was like, I don't want to, take away merits, because I think that's amazing to cover that too. And I believe in that. But for me, I was like, well, you're not going to cover, a major sport here in your city. Like, it's major, like they're winning, they're doing huge things, et cetera, et cetera. And he was kind of like, oh, I don't know who that is. I'm like, oh, let me go see, so to me, to the difference. And that was probably like, what, I want to say 15 years ago that I was an intern. And I've seen it change a lot. Is it at the level where I would want to see it, the coverage of the sport? No, it's not. I don't think it's gotten there yet. Maybe here in Houston, it will get better with the World Cup leading to it, for sure. And hopefully it will stay at that level after it. Because, it's one of the things that we also said that for women's soccer, I had people reach out to me, like 4 or 5 years ago, because they couldn't find anyone else that actually knew about women's soccer in Houston. And I was like, things like that. And I was like, I mean, I'm so happy you guys called me. But I was just sad because nobody else was covering it. Like, how many times I had to fight for editors to let me write about women's soccer is crazy to me. It's crazy to me, because I had to fight for the story. But that's where I'm going. I think that there's a disconnection sometimes for people that don't have that generational connection, or that they come from a different place. Whether it's England, because England is the country that came here and brought the immigrants. But they don't have that connection to that sport compared to perhaps some of us that have migrated here in their last, 30, 40 years.
Victor, part of growing the sport and kind of combining some of the topics we've discussed today, better attendance at Shell Energy Stadium, Houston, a soccer city, the United States, a soccer country, is the coverage. Are we headed in the right direction where it's being covered? I still see, rarely, by the way, because things have changed, the local news, I guess they still have news at night and they still have a sports segment. And when it's 3 minutes they're not mentioning every night the Dynamo or Dash result, but they sure are going to get in that Astros and Rockets final score. And of course, they're all over the Texans. So whether it's local or national, Victor, and you live this, you are a sports journalist. Lauda, you live this, you are a soccer sports journalist. Are we improving? I still see a lot of old school people, Lauda, like you mentioned, who simply don't know the sport and they don't feel it's theirs to cover. But Victor, are we headed in a different direction on the media side?
I think in certain markets, yes. And the big reason is because, these outlets have to see the audience there. They have to recognize it. I think once they do, then it's like anything else. It's like when something's trending online and every outlet tries to jump on it because it's the hot thing somebody's talking about. They probably don't see an audience. And again, many times, and it's not just a Dynamo in other cities, the attendance isn't there for the MLS product or in some NWSL cities as well. So that might play into, it obviously plays into in the lack of coverage. But next year, they're not going to ignore it next year. Everybody's going to be talking about it daily because the numbers will be there, the people, the multitudes, the money behind it. And then, of course, the big question is, will it last, right?
Exactly.
Will it continue after the World Cup's gone?
Exactly.
But I think at the very least, it'll pique interest. It'll start asking some questions. It'll start developing some stories naturally, right? I think locally, it'll, again, whether they start asking, whether they get to the basics, what is soccer? How is it played? So-and-so, or do we have a local soccer team? And, have they won championships? And depending on how big they want to how big they want to dig into some of the stories, I think, we'll see. But again, in markets like when Atlanta was selling out, right? I think you saw the mainstream Atlanta media covering those teams. I think you've seen coverage in Seattle. I think you've seen coverage in other MLS cities. When the team is filling up its stadium and
Sure.
It's winning and it's getting big results, you start to see that. In part, that's a big reason for it.
Victor, I think we've lived it in Houston when the game, the team first started. We lived it in Austin, where they were the darlings of Austin, Texas. The team was, and then now look what's changed. So a lot to go on. Let me make a transition though, Victor and Lauda. Speaking of media, speaking of coverage of soccer, and Victor, you brought this to my attention, and I've seen this several times. I actually have gotten in trouble for what I'm going to say next. There are a lot of Spanish-speaking commentators who feel that it's really simple to, you know what, I'm just going to start talking in English, and it's good enough if I have an accent. And I don't want to offend anyone. We all have accents. My father had an accent, and I love him for trying to learn the language. But Victor, is there now a line being crossed, and I'll start with you, Victor, on the way we should present as a commentator the game in either language? Is it okay to kind of speak English like you recently made us aware of? And that's happened in the past. Maybe very knowledgeable person that in Spanish can speak very eloquently, but in English, it's more of a turnoff? Question mark? Victor, I'll start there. And I know we have a lot of conversation about this, but Victor, can we do better? Is it just they don't have any English-speaking people that can cover these games? And maybe you can fill us in on the details. And we'll be happy to run the clip, friends, and have you judge for yourselves if that's even the right word. Victor.
Yeah, look, and I'm not trying to make fun of anybody for trying to speak English, but I think at some point, it speaks more to where broadcasting is, where soccer broadcasting is currently, and maybe sports broadcasting as a whole, really. A lot of decisions are made on money.
Budgets.
What's the cheapest? What's the cheapest option? And sometimes you lose out on more experienced talent because of that. And I think in this situation, it's easy for TUDN to just pay commentators that are already on the payroll to do the game in English instead of uh, making an English team, going out and trying to do it in a way where it can captivate an English audience, maybe even teach an English audience a little bit more about Liga MX instead of making it hard for them to listen and stay, not be distracted, right? By maybe just some expressions that sound unnatural. I'll leave it that way. But again, I think as a whole, the Apple TV commentators for MLS, I think, especially in English, leave a lot to be desired. There's no analysis of the game. It's very evident that they're towing the company line. They're not going to say anything that hurts anybody's feelings or makes any player look bad if they didn't do well on a defensive play or even an offensive play. I mean, I think, and this isn't what you would get with American football, right? If you're watching an NFL game, players are going to get criticized if the ball goes through their hands, or if they make a wrong move. And I think it's such a sensitive, and it is a lot of politics too, to all of this. But I think more than anything, it just speaks to the current state of broadcasting in soccer, which again plays into everything we talked about today. Why it's maybe not a bigger sport in this country. All these factors play into it.
Laura, I'll steer you in a direction of an example we all know. Andres Cantor, well known for his goal calls, a celebrity for those goal calls, and someone that speaks Spanish very well. Maybe not everyone's Spanish. Maybe we don't agree with his opinions, but he is traditionally known as a Spanish language soccer commentator. He's crossed over a few times. He gets paid probably really good money to be a commentator and do that in English. Is that fair? Is that enough? Is it because you don't have any commentators? Like my English and Spanish, which are not perfect, and I'll be the first one to admit I need to work on this every day. Andres Cantor has an accent. Is that good enough? Is that okay? Is that if someone were calling an NFL game, and it has happened, there would be outrage and criticism. We just don't do that in our sport, do we? We tolerate it. We accept it. Is it okay, Laura?
Well, honestly, I have a lot of opinions about accents because, I'm a native Spanish speaker. It's my first language. So there's words that I don't pronounce properly in the English language. I have some accents here and there. So I don't mind it. I mean, we have to hear, and most of the games that we've seen sometimes in the past have been from people from England, and they have a thick accent, or from Ireland. But it's the only way to watch a game. So are we going to criticize that and say, well, we don't want to hear the Irish and the English accent?
No, but hold on. But I will push back here. But for many, it's charming. That's the original language. Yes, it's an accent. I'm glad you point that out. But you hear a Latino accent, and it's not quite the same? Question mark?
Well, I mean, now you're talking about preferences, and we're going to talk about that. Let's say the preferences for, a Southern American accent or a Central American accent or an American accent. When I was very young, they told me that I should tone down my Colombian accent because I wasn't marketable enough, that people weren't going to like me because my accent was too strong, and to try to make it more neutral and et cetera, et cetera. And I understand that when you're writing, I think that when you're writing, you need to write a neutral Spanish because words that mean something for Colombians mean something else for people from Nicaragua,
sure,
or people from Mexico and things like that. But when you're speaking, it's just your accent. There's certain things that it's going to come out as an accent unless you work with, a dialect professor and things like that. Houston, fortunately, has gotten to a level that we see so many people now that have many different accents. I mean, so that's the thing, and say, I don't want to listen to them because they have an accent that I don't like. I don't want to put limitations. So for me, I've heard some games being called someone that their main language is Spanish, they've learned English, and they have a thick accent. I enjoy it because I feel like it's a little bit more exciting, or way more exciting, the way that they do call the game, than perhaps listening to someone that has an English accent, because we know that the way that they do the narration of that, the game is a little bit more neutral, a little bit more calm. Maybe they want to call it more elegant, more poised. while we have the Latin Americans, the Central Americans, the Latino community that tend to do their calls a little bit more exciting, a little bit more loud, a little bit more rambunctious. For me, it's more passion. So sometimes, I've seen the games being called by someone that has a thick accent, but I enjoy it because I feel like it's a little. They're bringing that Spanish Latino energy into the English market that I feel the games need sometimes. Because I've heard people say, "Well, I don't want to watch the games because they're boring," and I'm like, so I don't know.
Even if it's distracting, and even if the vocabulary is it doesn't make any sense. Victor, there's been several examples of that. I have no idea what the man is trying to say. I think I'm picking it up. And also, we talk about audience. We talk about growing the sport. You know the political wave that's in this country. Many want to make English the official language of the United States. And again, a conversation for another day. Criticism will be rampant, I think, Victor, if someone with an accent called the game in English for the World Cup. This was a kind of hidden away match that maybe didn't bother many people. But can this go mainstream, Victor? I don't want to be controversial for the sake of it, but I think it's the times we're living, and clearly it's happening, and major broadcast networks are doing it.
Yeah, I go back to it. I think it speaks to the investment and the oversight that we have in media currently, especially in broadcast sports media. And listen, we do some games here with PTS Media on Deportes Nation. We recently broadcasted the Dash game against Rayadas in Spanish.
Allegedly, some would argue in Spanish.
No, I think it's like if you throw. I'm not questioning in this certain example with Tudene the experience of the Mexican League, but it's clearly not a language they speak fluently. And I think, again, if you're trying to make a full effort, you can find an American commentator or just a commentator that speaks a little bit better English.
Sure.
That has covered soccer in this country. And an analyst that speaks a little bit better English and make it a more professional broadcast. Because I think if it was the other way around, if they put somebody who wouldn't speak perfect Spanish for a game on Univision, on TUDN, fans would kill the broadcast. They would say, this guy, he can't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
This is a bad listen. I mean, I think
Victor,
if you go the other way, it's the same thing.
It's been done before that they have someone that has a accent that they're not native speakers in Spanish that have called games. So I mean, they've been able to cross, not a lot of them, but I can think of at least one person that has called or been like a color commentator for games of like the U.S. and Mexico, or the U.S. and Panama and things like that. It's like one of the color commentators that he's not a native Spanish speaker.
But you see the example, Laura. It goes both ways. When there's former Latino or Latina players that are brought into the booth, they may be very knowledgeable, but can they communicate that in both languages, or in this case, in Spanish, so that it makes sense?
It shows you the importance also that the producers, the people in charge, give to the sport and to these games. Because I would equate it to, listen, we get like the Chronicle. They'll send an intern to cover a Dynamo game, right? That's the importance they give to an MLS game. Do you think they would send an intern to write the main story for an NFL game? I mean, I think it's probably a dire state of media if that's what's going on, right? But that speaks to you the importance. They would send an experienced writer, right? And to write a feature, they would send an experienced writer to go conduct the interview. The same thing here. In Spanish, no question, these guys can pull it off. In English, I think you can see the struggle there, and I think it goes in a different domino effect. People aren't going to listen to that. In turn, maybe they're going to say the audience isn't there in English. People don't want to listen to Liga MX in English. The audience isn't there. But I think, again, if you're trying to do an effort to do a professional job together, you can put these elements together. You can find a commentator. If they don't want to fly somebody in, you can find, I'm sure, somebody locally in Miami that can do it.
Victor,
but again, it just speaks to the importance that's giving to some of these to some of these positions.
We value all of you friends that watch us, and I'm going to bring up one of the dirty little secrets of our industry, Victor and Laura, and you know this because you've lived it. And this is the reality, friends, certainly of Spanish language media in this country, that the leadership, the oversight, very often, even to this day, sadly, is from people that don't have an idea about our language, meaning Spanish, of what it is, and certainly about the sport. And it's driven, Victor, as you've mentioned, by the dollar. And I get it. We run businesses. We have to have budgets. But there is no oversight because there are few people, I should say, that actually dominate both languages, Laura like you do, Victor like you do, and are able to even have an opinion about this in an intelligent fashion. And that's one of the downfalls, certainly in Spanish language. Here in this city of Houston, I grew up when Telemundo News had a producer that didn't speak Spanish. But that producer ran the news department, certainly the newscast, which is shocking to me when someone approving scripts didn't know what they were reading. But that was the reality of it. So I think the bigger conversation is here, where we are and where we're going. And you know what? I do think it's admirable at times, Victor, to try it and learn from it and give it a good faith effort. We all need to have opportunities. My hope and my wish is that better than you, Laura, better than Victor, certainly better than me, the next generation are going to be very bilingual, bicultural, trilingual, knowledgeable. That's what I think we're trying to build at the end of the day. I don't think it's criticism for the sake of it. I think it's about trying things and supporting, but also being open, Laura, and I'll let you get the last word on this one, being open to, hey, that's something you're trying, something different, not more of the same. And maybe fans are ready, Laura, for something different. Maybe they're not. But it's a sensitive subject. I understand it because we all live it. We have it in our families. But Victor, I think it's good and healthy to talk about it. Laura, the last word on this one before I get beat up by someone.
I just think that there's enough space, and I think that there's enough opportunities for everyone, whether they have an accent or whether they don't. I think for me, it doesn't bother me. For me, I just want them to do their job properly with good information, with statistics, making the game lively, making it interesting to me. Honestly, their accent, to me, it doesn't bother me. I enjoy the sport, whoever calls it. And like I've said before, not to offend, the English or the Irish or, the ones in Europe that call the games. But to me, it's not that I'm not understanding them or I can't, no, it's not that. Just to me, I'm just used to, the Latino calling a game that's a little bit more, passionate and it's just a different style. That it's a preference of style. Maybe for me, it's not a preference of language or accent. For me, it's just a preference of energy. I would say what energy they bring to the game. So I don't know. The only thing that I know is I'm gonna ask for a raise because I'm doing these things in English and Spanish. So you're gonna get a letter from me, Alex.
Absolutely, I'm gonna get a letter from you. We've got to wrap up, guys. But before we go to what's on our mind, Laura, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about. The Women's Copa America, or is it Copa America Femenil only? And I've heard referred to it that way. My point is it's going on. Great tournament, but with some deficiencies.
Yeah, it's Copa America Femenil. It's currently going on right now. And what's going on right now is also the Euros, Women's Euros, and also the African, they have a longer name. It's the Women's Africa Cup of Nations. So it's like different cups going on at the same time. And obviously we know that the Euros, they've seen the locker rooms, they've seen the stadiums and the treatment and things like that. And unfortunately, some of the Brazilian players were kind of comparing and saying, hey, well, hopefully Conmebol will wake up one day and say, hey, we want to have the same treatment that these women in the Euros are having. So it's just something that it's not new. We know for me, honestly, Conmebol has been doing this to women for a very long time. I can say from the Colombian women that, were in the national team that have been vetted or put in the blacklist because they spoke out about the injustices and even of like just the the organization of the Colombian league of not giving them jerseys, of giving them jerseys that were extra large or large, knowing that most of the players are either mediums or smalls, to those little kind of details, and speaking out against it and then being blacklisted. So I think it's brave. I think it's necessary not to be scared to speak out like the Brazilian women are doing and saying, Conmebol is not doing enough. They're not doing what they have to do. Because the men, I'm pretty sure they're not going to treat, the men like that. They're not going to have the Brazilian team go to locker rooms that aren't adequate. They're not going to have, the Argentinian team going to, rooms that are not adequate. So I think that needs to be fair, because these women have won their spots and being great, and with more difficulties in their way to get to where they're at. So I think, again, it's dropping the ball. It's showing, again, kind of like the lack of information of really wanting women's team to grow in South America.
Well, and we're moving, I hope, in women's sports in general, Laura, toward more of an equitable situation. So follow these international competitions. They're important, and they're building for the next generation, which we hope improves. Well, it is time for that last segment we call What's on Our Mind. And why don't we start with Victor Araiza. Professor Victor Araiza, what's on your mind today?
I'm looking forward to the MLS All-Star game. It's going to be up in Austin this week, so we'll see if Messi shows up. But certainly there's already some star power from the Liga MX side. James Rodriguez, Sergio Ramos, obviously Paulinho, one of the big scorers for the current champions Toluca, Alexis Vega, who's also on that Toluca team, Marcel Ruiz. They just won the Mexican Campeón de Campeones, another medal for Hector Herrera after leaving the Houston Dynamo. So there's that, and then shortly after, we'll have the Leagues Cup coming forward. So there's a lot of MLS against Liga MX, and this is a different version of the Leagues Cup that will feature an even number, 18 MLS teams against the 18 Liga MX teams. All the matchups in the first phase will be MLS versus Liga MX, so we don't have to deal with these MLS versus MLS or Liga MX versus Liga MX matchups in the group stage. So it'll be some interesting games, and obviously part of the first match day, Tigres visiting the Houston Dynamo.
So there you have it. A lot more football coming up. So, Victor, thank you for that. And yes, let's see what happens in Austin for the MLS All-Star Game. Laura, before I give what's on my mind, and it's a very small mind, limited mind, Laura Gomez, what's going on in that mind of yours?
Just, again, I know we just talked about it, but really following all the different championships that are going on right now. We have players from the Houston Dash that are in several of those cups. We have Barbara Olivieri, which is in the Copa America. She's representing Venezuela. We also have Michelle Lozzi, which is, with Nigeria, and a couple others from the NWSL as well. So for me, it's just really saying, take a chance if you've never seen a women's game, or just take a scroll on my Instagram and look at the information that I have with the women's game that I'm always sharing. I think it's important to support women's sports. And really right now, you can't say that you have no good soccer, because it's national teams. And let me tell you, I've seen some of the best games of my life during these cups. So I would for sure, suggest, if not push you to watch one of these games in all these different 3 cups that we're living right now.
I say demand, Laura Gomez, by the way.
Demanding. I demand for you to watch them.
An advocate of soccer, and certainly of women's soccer and women's sports. Laura, thank you for that. And friends, what's on my mind is, it's a little personal, is one of our SG1 soccer teams just went to a final match in Denver, Colorado, and Commerce City, Colorado. A national cup. They were defeated by a team from Georgia, but I'm proud of the 2012 boys team. They did a fantastic job. Coach Bruce, Coach Eugenio taking the team to a national competition after months and months of work and preparation. It's sacrifice from the boys. It's sacrifice from their families. It's sacrifice from the coaches. But I'm proud of them, even though they didn't win a national championship. And just think about those words, national champions. That would have been amazing. We've been blessed at SG1 in the past with 2 teams that have done that. But not only SG1, there's so many teams, Laura, Victor, friends, that are wrapping up their national competitions where they've gotten through the local, the regional, and have made it that far, many from the Houston and Texas area. So we're proud of all of them. And it's great to see the process of learning, not only on the field and tactical and losing and winning and growing as a young man, as a young woman, but the traveling, getting to meet other people, other players, other soccer fans from different parts of the United States and the world. So congratulations to the SG1 2012 boys, but also other clubs, whether it's in Houston or in the United States, that are going through this experience. Laura and Victor, I guarantee you that they will remember this probably the rest of their lives. For them and for many, to make it to that national stage is once in a lifetime. It's so difficult to get there and certainly to get back. So we're proud of them, and this speaks about the journey. And by the way, when I speak of sacrifice to parents, it's also really expensive. Flying or driving to Colorado, staying there, taking time off from work. And we'll talk about youth soccer and travel soccer and all of the expenses associated. So that's what's on my mind. Victor, before we wrap, a final word for tonight, for this latest podcast. I'm glad we're back, Victor, and you have a new look, which I'm proud of.
Yeah, I think we just, again, look forward to another week of soccer, and we'll see what we can talk about next week.
We'll put it together. Laura, before we go, a final word?
Just happy that we're back, and I demand for you to watch us. That's pretty much it.
And if she demands, you better do it. So, friends, on behalf of Victor Araiza, on behalf of Laura Gomez, I'm Alex Parra. Thanks for following us. Thanks for being with us here on this latest edition of what we call the Soccer Tejas podcast. Until next time.